Hey there, folks, and welcome out to the Single Player Podcast. I'm your one and only host, I'm16, but I got a good show for this week because we're going to be talking about G4 being hit with layoffs, Take-Two gets hacked, and the BlazBlue creator leaves, plus more. So sit back, relax, enjoy the show, and I'll be with you in a bit. Alright folks, and we're back, and now it's time to start the show with my favorite segment, your favorite segment, everyone in the world's favorite segment. It's time for the gaming forecast. So let's see what's coming out in the week of October 2nd to the 8th. Alright, on October 4th, you have two games coming out. Alfred Hitchcock's Vertigo, making its North American debut on Nintendo Switch, PlayStation 4 and 5, Xbox One, and Series X. And Dakar Desert Rally for Windows, PlayStation 4, 5, Xbox One, and Series X. Then on the 5th, you have just one game coming out, Death vs. Let It Die for Windows. And then on the 6th, you have three games coming out. Nier Automata, the End of Yora edition for Nintendo Switch. No More Heroes 3, releasing exclusively in Japan on PlayStation 4, 5, Xbox One, and Series X. And the Touch Detective Collection, Touch Detective Rina and the Fungi Case Files, releasing exclusively in Japan on Nintendo Switch. Then on the 7th, you have four games coming out. Chaos Head Noah Chaos Child Double Pack, making its Western debut on Nintendo Switch. LOL Surprise BB's Born for Windows, Nintendo Switch, PlayStation 4, 5, Xbox One, Series X, and Stadia. No Man's Sky for Nintendo Switch, and Nickelodeon Kart Racers 3 Slime Speedway for Windows, Nintendo Switch, PlayStation 4, 5, Xbox One, and Series X. And that was your gaming forecast. I gotta say, I appreciate the fact that there's a little less games coming out this week than past ones. It's been pretty crazy trying to literally just record audio of all of that in the past few weeks. So remember that dates are subject to change. Sometimes they move forward. Sometimes they just suddenly show up within the week. So keep that in mind. Also remember that all the music that will be played in this week's episode is available down below. So with that being said, let's move on to our first topic. Okay, so for our first story, we gotta talk about G4. Oh boy, you know it's gonna be sad. G4 has been in a lot of trouble lately. They've had higher-ups leave. I know Blair Herter left. I know who's the guy that originally started it. Tucker Roberts, okay? He's the son of the CEO of Comcast, and it was his brainchild, and he basically left back in March. And then a couple of weeks ago, in this one I talked about, the president of G4, Russell Aarons, she left. Either left or was laid off. I can't exactly remember. So they've been having some issues lately, and it appears, according to Kotaku, a source has confirmed to them that over 20 to 30 staff members have been recently laid off. Ouch! Apparently, this comes due to the new president, who's a Comcast executive named Joe Marsh, who came in after Aarons and has been basically trying to slash the budgets. So because of that, 20 to 30 staff members have essentially been laid off. Like, half of their streams have been canceled. So yeah, things aren't exactly looking good for G4. And on top of that, one of their hosts has been fired. Now, I'm sure all of you are familiar with Frosk. who is probably the most infamous people at G4. Because of the things she says, she went on this rant back in January, calling her viewers sexist and all this kind of misogynist. And if you look into it, it's complete bullshit. It was simply because people were dunking on her because of some of the takes she had about gaming, and that's really it. Okay, there was no sexism. All of the comments about her were talking about how she doesn't know what the hell she's talking about. That was it. Okay, but she decided to go on this rant, calling viewers sexist, misogynistic, all this sort of nonsense. Well, when the news came out about the layoffs, she decided to post one of the most tone-deaf tweets I have ever seen. Okay? This image with a lizard with these, deal with it glasses saying, "I survived." That's right. She was basically celebrating the fact that she wasn't laid off. All right? While at the same time, all of her co-hosts and people that she knew at G4 basically lost their jobs. All right. Well, after that, she was officially fired. Apparently, Comcast bought out the remainder of her contract, according to some sources. So, yeah, you know what? Here's the thing. Okay. I'm not going to celebrate her laying off because really here's the thing. I've gone through it. I know many people have gone through it. I guarantee you, most of you have gone through it, and you know people who have gone through it. It's not nice. It's not something you want to wish upon even your worst enemies, all right? But I'll say this. She did it to herself, okay? Because she has a shitty attitude. She treats people like shit. She treats her audience like shit. So, yeah, honestly, she did it to herself. None of this would have happened if she didn't go on that rant back in January. Because really, that's kind of that's the turning point for G4. They were doing kind of all right before that, but then she goes on that rant, and suddenly their viewership and subscriber count just drops. Because people don't want to hear it. Let me tell you something, okay? People do not like to be lectured. And when you get on your soapbox and tell people how the world should be, they walk away. They don't want to hear it, especially when you're talking about gaming. People don't want to hear your political opinions, all right? They don't want to hear about how they're sexist and they're misogynist and they're racist and all this other nonsense. The moment you start to do that, you start to lecture them about how your problematic behavior, they walk away. And we've seen this countless times. So you could say her rant, that was the turning point for a lot of it. But I think it's also the fact that just simply G4 is trying to run things like it was in the old days. And here's the problem. You can't do that anymore, okay? G4 was founded in an era before YouTube. It was founded when it was doing a lot of things that you weren't seeing anywhere else, okay? Icons, XPlay, well, after the merger, because it was before the merger, it was on Tech TV, and it was XPlay. But you know what I mean, okay? Icons, Cheat, Filter, Cinematech, all of that stuff had never been seen before because it was before YouTube. It was before people could actually edit their own videos together. Okay? So, essentially, they were pioneers at that time. It was the only way you could watch content like that, to actually watch game reviews, was through them. But now, you don't have to go through them. You don't have to have these fancy sets and such to do this shit. You have people. Here's the thing. You have people on YouTube who do this stuff entirely by themselves. There are channels out there with millions of subscribers, and they make all of their videos entirely by themselves. Okay? I know I don't have a lot of subscribers, and that's fine, because I don't see this as a business. I do this as a hobby. But this show, all of this, the editing, the thumbnails, the gameplay footage, recording, all of that is done by one person. Me. Okay? That's the thing. And I feel like G4 doesn't really understand that. They don't get that basically you can do all of that stuff. All the stuff that G4 did back in the old days on a much smaller budget and people won't mind. Okay? You can do there's channels with thousands of subscribers that do multiple person live streams where it's essentially just a glorified podcast that goes on to 4 or 5 hours long. Okay? You can do that. Okay, I can see, modern versions of classic G4 shows being done in that sort of way. Okay, you don't need live hosts to do icons. Okay, you don't need any host to do Cinematech. Okay, you can do filter where it's just one person and then maybe some gameplay footage with some people recordings of people talking about it and such. You don't need a set. You can do X-Play entirely without a set. You get what I'm saying here? Because people are already doing stuff like that on YouTube. It's just, it's kind of sad because this could have worked. It could have been amazing. And yeah, I do want X-Play to be good. I want it to be as great as it used to be. But it appears that the people running it have no idea what the hell they're doing. And it's a shame. It's a damn shame because I think what they need is people who not just understand gaming, but understand how the game is played on YouTube, how to do things, how you can do content on such a tiny ass budget. If G4 can hire people like that, then I think that they will survive. But if they don't try to fix anything, then you know what? To quote Judd Crandall, sometimes dead is better. Anyway, guys, I'm going to take a short break, and we'll be right back after this.
Want to get your game on?
Well, viewers, we've granted your wish.
Games, and more games. Turn to Tech TV for the best in gaming, gadgets, and fun.
Damn it, if you aren't the cutest little thing with a machine gun.
Let Adam Sessler and Morgan Webb show you how to turn it on.
We are a validating force to be reckoned with.
X-Play, weeknights at 11:10 Central, only on Tech TV.
All right, folks, and we're back. And first up in our next round of stories, we have to talk about 2K games. Now, last week I talked a bit about the GTA 6 leaks. Well, it seems that Rockstar wasn't the only one that was hacked, because it seems 2K itself was actually hacked. They put out a tweet saying the following, and I quote, "Earlier today, we became aware that an unauthorized third party illegally accessed the credentials of one of our vendors to the help desk platform that 2K uses to provide support to our customers. The unauthorized party sent a communication to certain players containing a malicious link. Please do not open any emails or click on any links that you receive from 2K Games support account. If you have already clicked on this link, we recommend immediately taking the following steps out of an abundance of caution." And they mention stuff like resetting any of your user account passwords, stored in your web browser, such as autofill, enabling multi-factor authentication, installing and running antivirus programs, checking your account settings to see if any forwarding rules have been added or changed to your personal email accounts, and so on and so forth. They also mentioned that 2K personnel will never ask you for your password or other personal information, and that their support portal will remain offline while they continue to address this matter. Damn, 2K, this is not your month, is it? Just isn't. But I'll give them credit. At least they're giving everyone the heads up and basically just being open and honest with people. Because that's the problem. Is I understand that you want to. You want to be secure and make sure that there's some information out there on how on how you handle security that doesn't get out. But at the same time, you need to be open with people and let them know, hey, keep an eye out for this and this. So I gotta hand it to them. I think they've handled the whole thing really well. But folks, this is why I never save any of my personal information on. With these companies. You know how you can click to save for future purchases? Never do that shit. Never. Because when you do that, they have it all saved on their servers, and then what happens? Someone hacks into the servers and they get a hold of it. So whenever you are putting your personal payment information into one of these companies when you're making a purchase, always make sure that box is unchecked. Okay, always. Just don't do it. Don't trust them, because again, if they're hacked, then that leaves all of your personal information wide open. So, like I said, I'll give them credit for being open and honest with people, but folks, never, ever have your personal information saved by these companies. Anyway, with that being said, let's move on to our next topic. Okay, so for our next story, we got to talk about Microsoft. So recently, Phil Spencer, the head of the entire Xbox division, was on Squawk Box on CNBC. And he was asked, of course, about their current acquisition with Activision Blizzard, as well as their competition. And he said something very interesting. He said, and I quote, "This is such a competitive market, I don't think we get to press pause on anything. Tencent is the largest gaming company on the planet today, and they continue to heavily invest in gaming content and game creators. Sony is a larger business than we are in gaming today, and they continue to invest. It's a highly, highly competitive market. We strive to be a major player. We want to deliver great content for our players, and we're going to remain active." And what I get from this is that he's basically saying they're not going to stop with the acquisitions. They're going to keep going with this. And look, I get what he's talking about, it being a highly competitive market, and he is right. It is a competitive market. But there's a point when you're spending almost $70 billion on a single publisher. You are buying an ungodly amount of IPs in one fell swoop, okay? There's a point where you do have to pause, all right, and be like, okay, we're good there, all right? No one is forcing you. No one's putting a gun against your head and saying you have to acquire more publishers after Activision Blizzard, all right? No one's telling you to get bigger after that, all right? I think you've had your full, all right? When you bought Activision Blizzard, you're kind of done after that, all right? And I think but it also brings up a far larger issue, and it's one that that bothers me a lot, and it's this idea of the monopolization of the entire industry, okay? What worries me is the idea that then you have Sony and Tencent, they're going to start trying to buy up every publisher in existence. And we might get to the point where essentially the industry is owned by maybe 3 major publishers, and that's it. Sony, Microsoft, and maybe Tencent. And if that ever happens, that is just unhealthy for the industry. What you're going to see is basically stifled creativity and just a lot of your favorite franchises completely dropping in quality because essentially they have an entire farm of developers just pumping out title after title after title. I know a lot of people would probably say, well, the answer to this is indie games. And while I love the indie industry, I'll say this, I don't think it's really enough to compete against, the bigger budget titles. I'm sorry, call me an asshole for saying that, but I just don't think it would be actually big enough. And I see a lot of people who hold up indie gaming as this sort of savior of the industry, and I don't agree with that. Because while indie games do incredibly well, the problem is they don't do well enough against the big leagues. And that I don't think is good enough for competition. So the way things are going, in my opinion, I think we are heading to another gaming crash. And if that happens, trust me, it ain't going to be like 1983. So anyway, let's move on to our next story. All right, and for our next story, recently Microsoft released the 2208 update. And it appears that it has an interesting little feature on it because you can now play your Xbox One games on the Series X and S without an online check. That's right. So here's what happened. Whenever you played an Xbox One game on the Xbox One, it would do an online check. Basically, it's online DRM. Well, it seems, according to a recent engineer lead at Xbox, they confirmed it, that basically they examined the data since the Series X and S launch, and they determined that an online compatibility check wasn't needed for the vast majority of Xbox One games. So they did away with it. And you know what? Bravo to Xbox for that one. Because here's the thing. I think there's one thing that we all miss when it comes to gaming, and that's the idea of just simply putting your game in the console and playing it. It used to be in the old days that whenever you got a game, you could just pop it in, and that was it. There was no online checks, no installing, no updates, none of that bullshit. And it was great. And I think a lot of us miss that. So I think this is a step in the right direction where, hey, let's get rid of the online DRM for a lot of these games. And that's really what it is. Sony does this. Even Nintendo does it in some of their cases, in some of their games. So, I gotta hand it to Microsoft for at least doing this. It's definitely a huge step up from a couple of years ago. Well, just before the Xbox One launched, when they put out that reveal video. Well, it wasn't in the video, but they confirmed that you would need a constant internet connection just to play your games. So this is a huge step forward, in my opinion. And I'm glad to see that Microsoft is at least doing something good with this. Anyway, I'm going to take a short break, and we'll be right back after this.
The ships that go sailing.
sewer surface.
All right, folks, and we're back. Now, before we continue, I just want to address something because there's somewhat an update to the G4 story. Apparently, and take this with a grain of salt, some people are claiming that Adam Sessler was fired. Now, the problem is that there's no evidence to corroborate this. So, if you see it around, people saying that Adam Sessler has been fired, take it with a grain of salt because most likely it's complete bullshit. If it's confirmed, I'll talk about it next week. But for now, just wanted to address that and say take it with a grain of salt. Anyway, with that being said, let's move on to the first up in our last round of stories. We have some sad news coming out of Arc System Works because it's just been coming out that Toshimichi Mori, best known as the creator of BlazBlue, has officially left the studio. That's right, ladies and gentlemen. The news came out on Twitter where he personally posted and said, and I quote, "I have an announcement to make to our users. I, Toshimichi Mori, have left Arc System Works after many years of service. I was involved in the development of Guilty Gear X at a company called PickPack, and that was the beginning of my career at Arc System Works. After working on a number of fighting games, I was able to develop my masterpiece, BlazBlue, and I have had the opportunity to have relationships with a lot of users. I have treasured the many experiences I have gained over the past 20 years since joining Arc Systems Works. I would like to express my gratitude to the Arc System Works staff, the people who have helped me, and the users who have supported me. Thank you very much. I am very sorry for this. I am truly very sorry about this. I hope to be able to deliver games to our users in some form in the future, and I will do my best to achieve this. Now, the thing that gets me is that he doesn't really explain why he's leaving, and there's a whole bunch of speculation right now. My guess is primarily because of the state of the BlazBlue series. Really, there hasn't been a lot of games released in quite a while. In fact, the most recent one was an iOS Android game, and that thing only lasted less than a year. So, like the actual, the last time we actually got, an arcade and console fighting game was Cross Tag Battle, and that was back in 2018 and 2019. So, it's been a long time, and my guess is maybe the series was stagnant, and so they decided not to continue it, or maybe there was a disagreement about the future of the series. That's my guess. There's some other people who speculated things. Probably the dumbest one I ever saw. And no joke, this is what some people were saying. Some people were actually claiming that he left over the whole Bridget thing. I'm sorry, but if you think that, then you might as well wear a helmet and take the short bus every day because you're fucking retarded. It's just, I read a couple of people saying that on Twitter. I'm like, oh, Jesus Christ, people, move on already. Just move the fuck on. But no, if most likely if he left, it's probably because of creative differences or whatever, or something involving the BlazBlue series. You know what? I wish him the best, and I'd like to see what he'll be creating afterwards. But anyway, with that being said, Godspeed, and let's move on to our next story. All right, and for our next story, we got to talk about Embracer Group. So recently, they had their annual general meeting, and they talked about a lot of stuff regarding the finances of the company and such. And one of the topics that was brought up was Saints Row. Now, I'm sure all of you have heard about the reaction to the recent Saints Row game and how people seem to be not really liking it. Well, when the game was brought up, the CEO of Embracer, Lars Wingfors, actually had a statement. He said, and I quote, "Personally, I had hoped for a greater reception to the game. It's been very polarizing. There are a lot of things that could be said in detail around it. But I'm, with one hand, happy to see lots of gamers and fans happy, and at the same time, I'm a bit sad to also see fans not happy, so it's difficult. I think we need to wait for the quarterly report in November to have more details around this. We're still fairly early in our release window and still collecting data, and there is also bug fixing and more content coming. On the financial side, I know or I'm confident we will make money on the investment. Would it have as great a return on investment as we have seen in many other games? Not very likely, but we will make... Okay, and for our last story, we got an update on E3. That's right, ladies and gentlemen. As some of you know, next year E3 will be returning in person. It'll be the first time since 2019 that it's been an in-person event. And this time they're actually splitting up into two major events. So you have the expo itself, which will be running for 4 days between June 13th to the 16th at the LA Convention Center. However, before that, there will be digital events and showcases starting on June 11th. So if you look at the calendar, that's literally almost the entire week, because June 11th is Sunday and then June 16th is a Friday. Yeah, that's how big we're going this year. My God, it's going to be massive. And you know what? I'm actually kind of looking forward to it because it'll be the first ever E3 special I'm ever going to hold on this show. You realize that, right? Like, I've never done an E3 special. 2019, the show premiered like a month after E3 ended. 2020, COVID happened and I put the show on hiatus. 2021, the show was still on hiatus. And then 2022, they canceled it just as I bring the show back. So hopefully it won't get canceled this time. Let's cross our fingers and pray to God that it will not get canceled. Because you know what? I want to host an E3 special. You know, maybe do some running commentary on the press conferences and such. Who knows? Overall, I could tell you this. I'm kind of excited for E3 returning, even though I'm a bit mixed. Because on one hand, it's kind of like, yeah, E3, you know, it's a staple of the industry. But at the same time, I kind of question if whether or not having another E3 is necessary, because you already have had several publishers doing their own showcases. Hell, Jeff Keighley basically hosted a glorified E3 just a few months ago. So I have to question whether or not it's actually a good idea to continue hosting E3. But you know what? If the industry wants to host it, that's perfectly fine by me. So anyway, with that being said, I'm going to take a short break and we'll be right back after this.
Rated M for mature. Saints Row 2 in stores October 14th.
All right, folks, and that's it for this week. I want to thank you all for listening. Remember, if you liked any of the music in this week's episode, links are in the description, and that's it. I'll see you all next week, and remember to keep gaming.